Today we're building a set of modular palisades for your tabletop games. We'll be using bamboo dowels and a layered painting job to create a realistic, weather-worn palisade fort, complete with a working gate. For my board, this fits perfectly as a defensive position for the forces of Rohan, holding back a horde of Uruk-hai and Moria goblins. We'll begin by preparing all the materials, the logs, the spikes and the wooden planks. Then we'll be building the main palisade walls, shape the corners and construct the working gate. After that we'll add texture to the bases and make a few optional extras like steps and a battering ram. Then it's on to painting, groundwork and finally the small details that bring everything to life. With that overview in mind, let's begin with the prep. We'll begin with around 150 logs with spikes, and for these I'm using 5mm bamboo dowels. Straight out of the pack they look a little bit too perfect, so let's roughen them up. I use a rotary tool to add scratches and dents, and a knife to take out some bigger chunks. Next I cut each one into 5.5cm. I use snips for this. Bamboo is fairly soft and a firm press cuts straight through. Once they're all cut, it's time to carve the spikes. I mark 1cm from the top, holding my knife at a slant and cut while turning the dowel to create a sharp point. Now repeat that about 150 times. That's the main batch done. Quick cleanup, and now let's make the smaller ones. These are 4.5cm tall and thankfully they don't need any spikes. Next it's time for the wooden planks, and balsa wood is ideal for this. For added texture, take a wire brush and drag it with the grain. It creates perfect, fine detail. My balsa sheets are 10cm square, so I cut it into equal strips 3.3cm, which is the perfect width for a mini to stand on. Then I cut those into 5mm planks. Don't worry about being too accurate, small changes in width will help with realism. I also like to soften some of the clean, straight edges. It's easy to do and it gives the planks a carved, worn look. Quick cleanup again and the boards are done. For the final bit of cutting we'll need some support legs, so cut around 30 pieces about 2cm long. Each side of the palisade will be 30cm or 12 inches. Take some foam, I'm using 5mm XPS, cut to 6cm deep and 30cm wide. To add a bit of height to the front, I glue on an extra 2cm strip. Now let's get gluing. Take 4 of your 2cm supports and glue them on as legs at either side. About 1cm in and 2cm back, but you don't need to be too precise with this. On top of those legs, glue a couple of full-length 30cm bamboo sticks. This gives us our basic frame. You can add extra supports if you like I added a few extra to the sides, but this is mostly visual. Now grab a handful of spikes and let's get gluing our first palisade together. I like to start from the middle and work outwards, but you can begin wherever you prefer. I alternate between spike sections for cover and flat sections where the defenders can fire arrows over. But again, this is really down to how you want your palisades to look. Hot glue works well here for that instant grab and hold. Just keep going until the whole length is covered. I run an extra bead of hot glue underneath, which locks everything together and makes the whole piece nice and solid. The next step is optional. I add one more beam along the front and cut some supports to sit underneath. What isn't optional are the planks, and that's next. I use tacky glue for these. It grips well but still gives you time to adjust the placement. Keep adding plank after plank until you've completed. And that's our long side finished. You'll need 3 of them, so get building. Take 2 pieces of 6cm square foam and mark 2cm in from the edge. Then cut that section away. Glue down 4 supports and 2 crossbeams, cutting them at an angle so they sit flush with your base. Glue on your spikes, and for the planks I glue on a full piece of balsa wood and then cut it and mark it in place. After that, just round off the edge of the base. And using my highly advanced mathematical expertise, I quickly calculated that we'll need 4 corners to make a square, so I repeat the process 3 more times. Okay, let's make a gate. I take some thin foam and cut it to 6cm high and 3cm wide. And for the gate posts I make some 1cm square blocks of wood, which are about 6cm long. We're going to make some simple hinges using masking tape. I make a small loop and that gets glued in between the 2 gate posts. Little tip, hot glue melts XPS, but if you add a small piece of masking tape first, it gives the glue something to grip onto. I wouldn't use this technique on large areas, but for little details like this, it's super handy. For the back of the gate, make sure to leave a gap so it can swing fully open. I just open the gate and glue on my first post in that position, and from there, glue the rest along the back. Now let's build the rest of the gate side using exactly the same method we used earlier. Just remember to leave a gap for the gate itself. I'm going to start by texturing all the base with earth texture paste. Another tip, use your hands. I've recently started doing this instead of using a brush. It saves your brushes from getting ruined and it's much quicker. While the texture paste dries, let's make a few quick extras to bring the palisades to life. First, we'll need some steps so defenders can get up onto the walls. I originally made a set from bamboo, but they were far more fiddly than they were worth, so instead, I modelled a simple set of steps in Blender, printed them out and glued on some balsa wood planks for texture. I'll make this STL available on Patreon for anyone who wants to use it. Next, I'm making a small wooden pallet from balsa wood, which later will glue on a pile of rocks. It works nicely as a stack of ammunition for defenders to throw down at the attackers. And finally, a battering ram for the attackers. Just a long dowel with barbecue skewers glued around it at 1-inch intervals. The spacing makes it easy for models to hold and carry the ram during games. With those extras finished, the texture paste should now be dry, so let's get back to the model and begin painting. As with all paint jobs, the key to getting great results is layering different colours and shades. I begin with a green-brown base colour, applied using a makeup sponge. Next, I give everything a quick brown wash. Another tip, use contrast paints. They're very pigmented and can be thinned down a lot, so you barely need any paint. Brush that over all the spikes. I make another wash for the balsa wood boards, and they're incredibly satisfying to paint this way. Then I layer on some highlights with a grey dry brush. Now let's add some greens to represent moss. I use mute green for a bright, vibrant tone, and Elysian green for a more muted, natural forest green. I use a stippling technique to apply the moss in random patches. Next, I add another layer of thin contrast paint, but this time I use the airbrush. You can absolutely do this step with a regular brush, but the airbrush uses less paint and gives me more control, letting me darken some spikes more than others to create even more colour variation. Onto the groundwork. I'm going for a palisade set in a healthy field in Rohan, so I wanted plenty of greens. Just like with painting, we're layering different textures to get a realistic finish. I start with some static grass, next I add some foam flock that I've mixed with PVA, and I finish with a layer of sawdust flock. Onto the final stretch now, let's make some little spikes. I use barbecue skewers and pre-paint them, then chop them into short lengths, sharpen the ends and glue them into the mud as an extra line of defence against attackers. Now let's add some contrast back in with a light grey dry brush over the spikes. And a touch up of moot green on the moss. For the final detail on the gate, I wanted it to look like earth that has been compressed after years of people walking through, so I add some pigment powders to shift the shade slightly and sell that worn, trampled look. With that final detail, the palisade is complete. We've created a sturdy, modular defensive line that works beautifully for Rohan or any scenario that needs a fortified position. And because each section is freestanding, you can reconfigure it for sieges, skirmishes, or full battle lines. It's a deceptively simple build, but incredibly effective on the tabletop. I'm personally really pleased with how this set turned out, and I hope it inspires you to try your own version. Thanks for watching.